I believe we got Tom with us now. Tom Beer, you with us?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, boss?
Good, good. How about yourself?
All right, can't complain. We're over here talking about the Knicks, and perfect time for you to jump in. Do you think Baron Davis could really save the Knicks?
It's a good question, fair question, and I think he'll definitely have a big impact. Obviously, one of the more serious flaws of the Knicks so far this season has been lack of a true point guard. When you have accomplished scorers like Carmelo and Amari on the wing at the forward spot, having a point guard who can set them up and facilitate the offense is essential, especially in D'Antoni's offense, as we know. So not having a true point guard, Tony Douglas has flopped in his attempt to masquerade as a true point guard. And Iman Shumpert, while I definitely like his game, a lot of upside, a lot to like there, more of a combo guard than a true point. So that brings us to Baron Davis. I do like the fact that they are hopefully not going to rush him back. The Knicks are going to need him if they have any chance to make some noise in the playoffs. They're going to need a healthy Baron Davis. So you want to make sure that he's 110% healthy before you rush him back. So it'll be interesting. I think the Knicks are bound to are due for a positive uptick. They're a better team than they've shown thus far, and I think Baron is coming in at the right time, so he'll get a lot of credit for that success when they do start playing better. Partly, and I do think he'll definitely have a positive impact in the long run.
Tom, Frank here. You think he's going to have a positive impact? And well, him just being on the team does give a positive impact. I don't see him as the type of point guard needed for a D'Antoni system. When I look at D'Antoni over the years, the point guards the only time he had winning seasons, now the point guards were Steve Nash, and last year for a short while, Raymond Felton. I believe he needs speed, pass first type point guards. I don't see Baron being that guy.
You're not wrong. He's not the prototypical D'Antoni point guard in the sense, that he's a guy that's going to set up others before himself. He's been known to be a bit of a chucker in the past, and is certainly a guy that can look for his offense. But the fact remains, he still does have point guard skill set that you're looking for, or at least he's more suited to play point guard than anybody the Knicks have on the roster. Just looking at his numbers, even last year before he went down with the back injury in Cleveland, he was averaging over 7 assists a game in his last month with the Cavs. And we've known when he's played with the Clippers and throughout his career with the Hornets, he can guy that can dish out 8-9 assists a night. So there is some upside there. Again, I agree with you. He's not the prototypical ideal point guard you'd want, but there definitely certainly is an improvement there. And I think he understood his role when he came to the Knicks too. I don't think he's looking to be the same, guy that's going to. He understands that Melo and Amari are going to be the guys that get the majority of the shots with the Knicks. He knew that coming in. I think that was sort of an appeal for him. So I guess we'll have to see how he adjusts his game once he settles in with the Knicks.
So, Tom, this is Matt here. This is Tom Beer from HoopsWorld.com on Flagrant Foul with us. My next question for you would be, we've been hearing all these rumors about a trade possibly happening. Is there a trade that the Knicks make? And if there is, who for who?
I wouldn't. I think the Knicks are obviously going to be working the waiver wire. It's something that ideally that they'd like to improve the situation as right now is not the mix or the record that they want. But at the same time, if they're hamstrung in the sense that they don't have a lot of assets to trade. Obviously, Amari's uninsurable contract got about another $80 million coming to him. Melo's got a ton of money on his deal. And Tyson Chandler's the one guy that has been mentioned frequently in some deals with Dwight Howard. However, the Knicks can't trade Chandler until March 1st at the earliest due to the restrictions in the CBA. You can't sign a guy that was signed this summer until March there early. So we're a month away from even discussing whether Chandler can be included in such a big deal. So to be honest, I don't think the Knicks can get bailed out by a trade. I do think that they will improve. I think Baron Davis will be one reinforcement. I do think they have another reinforcement coming. They still have that room exception, that $2.5 million exception they didn't use over the free agency period, in that short free agency period. So they're going to have a shot to sign some of the players coming back from China, such as Kenyon Martin, Aaron Brooks, J.R. Smith. Those will be some of the guys that the Knicks can look at. Wilson Chandler's coming back as well, but he's a restricted free agent with Denver, so the Knicks aren't going to have the cap room to make a move on him.
Is Landry Field still looked at as maybe a tradable asset?
Yeah, I guess it depends. It kind of depends on you, how you value Landry Fields. Obviously, the Knicks and Donnie Walsh were really high on him last year because he was playing so well. Won Rookie of the Month the first 2 months in the league. Then he obviously leveled off and kind of went to the tank there once Melo got in town in the playoff series against Boston in particular. I still think he has a commodity in the fact that he's making basically the league minimum, right around $800,000, and he's a starting two-guard on an NBA team, and he's not going to hurt you. Even when he's not scoring, he'll get some rebounds. He actually led the NBA in rebounds for guards last season. He obviously isn't quite the player as some Knicks fans had hoped when he busted out of the gates initially during his rookie season last year. But he's kind of settled into a solid role right now. He scored in double figures in 4 of the last 5 nights. So I do think that there is, and especially on a team like New York when you have Melo and Amari, if you bring Baron Davis back, you don't need a guy that's going to be able to score 20 points a night. You need a guy that's going to rebound the basketball and defend consistently, and I think that's what Landry Fields does rather well. And I also think he'd be amenable to shifting to the two-guard spot, to the bench, if they did need, in fact, if D'Antoni wanted to start Shumpert at the 2, or if they bring J.R. Smith, in after the CBA, the Chinese Basketball Association season ends. So would other teams value him as much as the Knicks? Probably not. But if the Knicks could get a great piece, or even a piece that would improve their roster, get them a point guard, they'd certainly be open to that too. But again, they don't have much depth in the backcourt, so trading Landry Fields will leave you the issue that you don't have unless you got a two-guard pack, you'd still be, you'd still have a thin bench, and that'd be worrisome, obviously, for the Knicks.
This is Tommy Beer with us on Flagrant Foul Radio. You can follow him at Tommy Beer on Twitter.
One last Nick question for you. Let's say they sneak in. Let's say they struggle the rest of the way and sneak in with the 8 and have a first-round exit. Is D'Antoni fired?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I think his job, it's with the way things are going now, I guess it would depend on, if they, fight, make it a tough 7-game series, and if they get swept by Miami, or if they get beat by Miami, if they play assuming the Heat get the number 1 seed and the Knicks sneak in as an 8 and they fight Miami tough for 7 games, then you can make a case that D'Antoni could keep his job. But it's not, it'd be tough for D'Antoni to make a real strong argument if they get in with 2 games below 500, sneak in as the 8th seed. The one thing D'Antoni probably does have in his favor is the Knicks are going to be obviously shopping for a point guard over the summer, and Steve Nash would probably be at the top of their wish list. Would having D'Antoni as their coach give them an edge in the chase for Steve Nash, who's an unrestricted free agent this summer? It's something to consider. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that respect.
All right, Tommy, I want to move around the league real quick. Is there any real market for any of the original Big Three?
In Boston, you're talking about?
Right.
It's an interesting question. I guess it depends. One, I don't think the Celtics are ready to blow up the franchise quite yet. If they got a good deal and they got younger pieces and assets and draft picks and young players, I think they definitely consider it. But looking at it from the other end, I don't think Ainge and Doc Rivers are ready to call us quits on this. I think, if they can somehow get KG healthy and Ray Allen into shape and Paul Pierce, back close to 100%, and Rondo has been dealing with some ankle injuries early on, I think that they feel, in a 7-game series, they can beat any team in the league. They have that confidence and they have that belief in themselves. It's unlikely, but in a short and truncated series, regular season, obviously a lot of teams are going to sneak into the playoffs. The Celtics, you'd have to assume, will make the playoffs this season. And if I was the Heat or the Bulls, I certainly wouldn't want to play them in the first round.
I agree I couldn't agree with that more, honestly. I think that they're still a scary team. Moving on from there, where do you see Dwight Howard landing, or do you see him leaving as a free agent?
Yeah, I think the Magic are going to ride it out. Obviously, roll the dice, a huge gamble, a big risk, potentially losing for nothing like they did with Shaq, so many years ago. But at this stage of the game, you're basically essentially trading Dwight Howard as a rental. You're not going to get the assets or the players that you would have gotten had the team that you're trading for been able to sign him to an extension. With the new CBA, you can't sign an extension. It's basically the Melo rule. You can't sign an extension with a team you're traded to mid-season. So, the team that trades for Dwight Howard would essentially have to let him go to become an unrestricted free agent, then with the implicit understanding that hopefully he'd re-sign with that team. But again, obviously that's a big gamble. So I think the Magic are just going to ride it out. They're playing well right now. They do have a roster that complements Dwight Howard. The big guy down low. They have a bunch of shooters they can spread out on the perimeter with Hito and J.J. Redick and Jameer Nelson when he's playing well. I think the Magic are another scary team. When you roll out Dwight Howard, definitely the best big man in the NBA, one of the best players overall in the NBA, gives you a chance to win every night. So I think that's another team that's going to take the chance in the playoffs. Hopefully they win a couple rounds. Maybe, if they can get the Eastern Conference Finals or the Finals, convince Dwight Howard that, hey, big fella, we got a strong nucleus in place here. Why don't you stick with us and maybe bring Darren Williams with you instead of leaving for Brooklyn to join D. Will. Why don't you try to convince D. Will to come down to Orlando, no state tax, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something that the Magic may, obviously hope for.
So do you think that is a possibility? Because that was my follow-up question. Where do you see Durant going if New Jersey doesn't land Dwight?
Right. I think it'll be very interesting. I think they're thinking of each other as a package deal right now. And I think it's going to sway the balance of power, whether D. Will can convince Howard to come down to Brooklyn or Howard can convince D. Will to come down to Orlando. Is obviously going to have a major impact on those two franchises. But I think those are the most likely scenarios. Durant has given some positive feedback to the Nets organization as far as, he's interested in staying there. He likes, some of the pieces in place. But obviously it all comes down to this summer. Obviously they're going to throw a max contract at D. Will, and then the question remains, who else can they get to flesh out that roster? Assuming Brook Lopez comes back healthy, they have him for at least another year. And then it'll be up to D. Will to hopefully convince if not Howard, then another big guy to sign with the Nets and make them a force.
If Howard rides out with the Magic and D. Will rides out with the Nets, is there any big trade? People have been starving for that big trade since the lockout started. Since before the lockout, they were talking about these possibilities of stars being traded back and forth. If those guys have to ride out with their teams, is there a big trade made this year?
I don't really see it. I mean, obviously we can't predict if something crazy goes on and the Knicks are 7, 8, 9 games under 500. Obviously they could really do something, get desperate and make a move. But that new CBA, I think one of the primary causes of the CBA was the players dictating where they wanted to go and having all these power. I think that the general managers and the owners wanted to make sure that they kind of had the final say. So I think that's going to have an impact on these blockbuster trades that we've seen at the deadline the last couple of years. I think it's going to minimize them. You're not going to see the Carmelos get traded. You're not going to see the D. Wills get traded mid-season. I think it's going to be a situation where they may get moved in the off-season or ride out and then sign with other teams as free agents.
This is Flagrant Foul Radio. We have Tommy Beer with us from hoopsworld.com. Tom, I want to ask you a question about Sacramento. A few weeks ago, they were having real trouble. They sent DeMarcus Cousins home. They're beefing, everything. They fire the coach. Cousins comes back. He's on somewhat of a tear since he's returned. What's the prognosis on that franchise and what they plan on doing with some of those young pieces? They still have Tyreke Evans, a great young point guard. What are their plans?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out in Sacramento. You can tell that Westphal lost that team. Cousins was unhappy, Tyreke Evans was unhappy, and it eventually led to Paul Westphal getting axed. And as you mentioned, DeMarcus Cousins went on a bit of a tear at that point, averaging basically 18 and 11 for the better part of 3 weeks. But he's come back down there a little bit. Tyreke Evans has played well in spots. To me, Tyreke Evans is, for the life of me, I can't understand why he hasn't put it all together in the NBA. Was terrific coming out of college. First season in the league, averaged 25 and 5. Him, LeBron, and Oscar Robertson, the only 3 NBA players that do that. And he just hasn't been able to put it together ever since. I mean, I don't watch enough Kings games. I watch them when I can from time to time on the League Pass because I've always been a fan of Evans. I love his game. I mean, he watches YouTube highlights. The guy's athleticism is incredible, a ridiculous handle. There's nothing not to love. But he doesn't put it together. And when you look at the box scores, 7 points and 5 turnovers. Then he'll go for 29, 9, and 7. The next night he'll go for 11 points, 2 assists, 3 rebounds. It must be extremely frustrating for Kings fans. So I don't have the real answer there. Seems like a decent kid. I've talked to him a couple times when he's come to the Garden. He seems like he has a decent head on his shoulders. Doesn't seem like too much of a knucklehead, but the consistency and the effort doesn't seem to be there night after night. Obviously, they're not going to move him. He's way too talented for the Kings to even consider trading. And ditto for DeMarcus Cousins. When all that Westfall upheaval was going down, obviously every team in the league called Sacramento, with an offer, a low-ball offer for DeMarcus Cousins, but they're not going to move DMC either. Jimmer Fredette hasn't been overly encouraging. The early returns on, he got a start last night with Marcus Thornton injured for the next 2 weeks with a knee injury. Jimmer played well last night, but I have questions as to whether he can be a sustainable NBA player, due to his size and inability to guard guards. But he obviously is a shooter. He'll be able to score. Maybe a six-man, Bobby Jackson type off the bench in Sacramento. So, yeah, they got pieces. They got a big man. They got guards. They gave Marcus Thornton a lot of money. He's their two-guard of the future, you assume. And we'll see what direction they go. Maybe if they get a strong head coach in there. And the other issue is as far as the franchise's future. Are they going to be in Sacramento long-term? The great fans of Sacramento, put on demonstrations last year and convinced them to stay for at least another season. But, the Maloofs have wandering eyes. So definitely a franchise in turmoil somewhat and still up in the air. But, it's one of those, they can go in direction. They have the pieces to kind of take those steps and eventually become a playoff team. Or do they settle into the bottom of the Western Conference? Remains to be seen.
All right, Tom, my next question would be, coming into the season, I wouldn't say that they were the favorite because how can anyone really be the favorite over the Heat? But the Bulls were certainly up there. Now with the loss of Luol Deng, which in my opinion is a big loss, it seems like they really, aside from Jalen Rose, they don't have that second guy. What's his situation? Is he done for the season? And if so, are they going to make a move?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you that Deng's a vital piece, for the Bulls, all things considered, because teams can just really clamp down on Derrick Rose. Throw 2-3 guys at him if they don't run it out to stretch the floor and at least hit a knock down a 17-footer. That's what Luol Deng provides to Chicago. It sounds like the injury's not as bad as once feared. He's even talking about he's going to play this weekend as early as Sunday. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see at this stage of the game. Obviously, players are going to be more optimistic than doctors. And even if he comes back early, how does the wrist respond? It's one of those wait-and-see situations. But I do like the Bulls. Obviously, they played well early on. Out east, I think it's the Heat and the Bulls as the top tier, and then everyone else a big drop-off to number 3. But I do think the Bulls can challenge the Heat in the Eastern Conference, assuming everyone's healthy. I think they're the only team that can do that, though.
Tom, I want to keep us out in the American Midwest, so to speak, and speak about Milwaukee. A report came out today saying Milwaukee is the least valuable franchise in all of sports, valued at roughly $268 million. So if you have $268 million and you're looking for a partner, we could go buy the Bucks. But other than that, my real question for you is there a possible rebirth of the Seattle Supersonics?
Yeah, the Forbes report is questionable, but Herb Cole's going to fight tooth and nail. It's one of those situations you feel terrible for the fans in Seattle because they definitely do deserve a franchise out there. The only tough thing is what fan base do you take away if you move the Bucks out of Milwaukee. You mentioned the fans in the Midwest are going to have obviously be upset about it. It's a tough situation. Milwaukee's another team that's easy to root for, has some good pieces in Bogut and Brandon Jennings. We'll see. It's one of those situations that's going to be made on the higher level. Seattle's going to keep fighting for a team, deservedly so. We'll see if they get lucky one of these years.
You mentioned that the fans of the Midwest will be mad. Any chance? I've heard Kansas City possibly looking as a option.
Sure, that's another team. When there were some questions in the NBA whether Oklahoma City would be a sustainable environment, and obviously they're one. That's one of the more electric crowds in the entire league right now. Anyone that watched any of those Thunder games on TV any of those Thunder playoff games last fall can attest to just how loud and raucous that arena was. Kansas City's another city, great sports town that would love to get a team. So we'll wait and see, and we'll see who can make the strongest bid, I guess, and then whether I don't think expansion's a reasonable option because if anything, And that's the other thing. A lot of NBA analysts and fans and you know, a lot of people close to the league feel, if anything, contraction would probably make more sense to the NBA as the league's, you know, potentially a little bit too watered down. So we'll see. It's you know, you can make a case for a lot of strong organizations. I guess we'll have to see how that plays itself out.
All right, I got two more quick questions for you. First one being, are the Lakers going to make a move? Because Kobe needs help.
Yeah, Kobe definitely does need some help. I have to question Mike Brown's thinking here, playing Kobe 38, 39, 37 minutes a night.
Thank you.
You think eventually down the stretch that wear and tear on a guy who's already got a lot of tread on it, you know, not that much tread left on his tires, may catch up to him. The problem again, like with the Knicks, the Lakers just don't really have that many tradable assets other than Gasol or Bynum, who obviously every team in the league would love to have. But then again, if you trade them, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul? You know, you got two great big guys. You know, you'd love to get a point guard in there, but are you willing to give up size to do that? One trade that's kind of working its way around the rumor mill was a move of Gasol to Houston for Luis Scola and Kyle Lowry. You know, how feasible that is or not, you know, remains to be seen. But, you know, would address the Lakers point guard issue and then get a serviceable, at least, replacement down low for Gasol. So a lot to be said. I'm sure, you know, obviously with the Lakers as popular as they are, there'll be a million rumors that pop up between now and the deadline. But I agree with you that obviously they'd love to address the point guard situation. The issue is whether they can make a move without, you know, sacrificing some depth somewhere else along the line. The other issue with the Lakers, too, is they have that traded player exception that they got from Dallas in the Lamar Odom deal. So obviously they'll be looking to move that as well.
Right. All right. Finally, my last question. I got to ask this to every basketball guy that we talk to. Is Dennis Rodman a top 50 player all time?
Good question. Dennis Rodman, top 50. He's one of those guys you'd love to have on your team, arguably the best rebounder of our generation, tremendous defender. A lot of people didn't give him credit. You know, they say he's a great rebounder, but defensively, the guy guarded everybody from centers to point guards. I definitely put him in the top 100. I don't think I could go top 50.
Thank you.
If you start looking at the, you know, top 50 players, you'd have to kick out some great. I mean, there was tremendous players that weren't even listed in the top 50. You know, you got guys like Bernard King and some other superstars, Dominique Wilkins, that weren't listed in the top 50. So those are guys that probably take ahead of Rodman anyway.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that answer. I've been fighting with countless amounts of people for that.
I believe the original question was
it
Hall
was
of Famer.
It was top 50. I agree with the Hall of
top
Famer.
50.
This argument started with our boy Alan from the Outrack and Chris show, and it's just snowballed, and I've gotten a whole bunch of different answers, and none of them have been the one that I wanted. Thank you very much, Tommy Beer.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Have a good night, boss. Everyone, that was Tommy Beer from hoopsworld.com. You can follow him at Tommy Beer on Twitter. That was a pretty awesome interview.
He was a lot of fun to talk to. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Honestly, I had like 100 more questions I could have asked him.
We're running out of time because I could have spent the next little while talking. Just Knicks. I have so many problems. Sure. I have so many problems with those Knicks, man. I could have asked him another 100. I was happy when he was like, yeah, I could see D'Antoni leaving. I was like, yes.
I know. I wanted to ask him, how bad is that Lamar Odom trade really hurting the Lakers right now? But I had to ask him the Rodman question because
it's understandable.
I got to ask everyone who is affiliated with the NBA that Rodman question.